the silent summit. There were 4 of them, climbers with big dreams and the kind of arrogance only the young, fit, and reckless possess. Everest had always been the pinnacle of human challenge, but for Alex, Leah, Greg, and Emma, it was just another mountain to conquer. They were seasoned enough to know the dangers, but they were also naive enough to believe they could outsmart them. They had all heard the stories, of course. Strange whispers in the wind, the sudden, eerie silence that would fall over the summit, the shadows moving in the corners of your vision when you reached the top. But those were just old folk tales, superstition bred from fear and isolation, or so they thought. It was only a few hundred meters from the summit when it started. The temperature plummeted, and the wind died down, as if the world had suddenly held its breath. The eerie stillness seemed unnatural in a place known for its ferocious winds and unrelenting cold. Leah was the first to notice the figure in the distance. She squinted through the biting cold and saw what appeared to be a shadow, flickering at the edge of her vision. "Did anyone else see that?" she asked, her voice a whisper. But the words felt too loud in the heavy silence. "No," Greg said, his breath coming out in thick clouds, eyes scanning the horizon. "There's nothing there." But Leah wasn't convinced. She kept staring, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck rise. It looked like a person standing motionless at the summit, too still, too silent. Alex, who had always been the skeptic, rolled his eyes. "It's probably just a rock formation. You're seeing things." But then Emma spoke up, her voice trembling. "No, I saw it too. It's moving." There was a moment of shared uncertainty before panic began to creep in, its icy fingers tightening around their throats. "Let's just push through," Alex said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. As they continued upwards, the figure grew more distinct. It wasn't a rock, and it wasn't a trick of the light. It was a man, or something that looked like one, dressed in tattered clothing that hung from his skeletal frame. His face was obscured by the hood of a long-forgotten parka, the fabric stained with what they could only guess was blood or dirt, or something far worse. His posture was stiff, almost mechanical, as though he had been standing there for decades. The wind kicked up again, but it was a strange kind of wind, unnatural, like it was trying to push them back, urging them to turn around. But they didn't. They had come too far. When they reached the summit, the figure was waiting for them, standing silently as if it had always been there. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. And then, in one sudden motion, the man, if he could still be called that, took a step forward. The sound of his boots crunching into the snow seemed impossibly loud, like thunder in the still air. Greg, the bravest among them, took a step toward him. "Who are you?" he shouted into the cold emptiness, but the figure did not respond. The others stood frozen in place, unable to move, unable to breathe. Suddenly, the figure lifted its head. The hood fell back, and what they saw beneath it was worse than any of them could have imagined. A face, gaunt and hollowed, with eyes black as pitch. There was no nose, no mouth, just empty skin stretched over a skull. And in that moment, they realized it was not a man at all. The ground beneath them began to tremble, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with a low, eerie hum. The sky above them darkened, the once blue expanse now a sickly shade of green, swirling with unnatural clouds. A deep rumble came from the mountain, an ancient, forgotten voice that echoed through their bones. "Turn back," the voice whispered, though no one knew where it came from. The sound reverberated within their minds, drowning out all other thoughts. Leah screamed, stepping back, but the figure's cold, empty eyes locked onto her, and she felt herself rooted to the spot. The others tried to run, but their legs betrayed them. The air had grown too thick, too heavy, and every movement felt like wading through molasses. Emma collapsed first, her body twitching violently as if something was ripping at her from the inside out. Alex reached for her, but before he could touch her, she was gone, vanished into the snow as if she had never been there at all. Greg followed soon after, his screams cutting off abruptly, as though something had seized his voice. Leah and Alex, the last two standing, looked at each other in horror. The figure was gone, but the mountain had shifted, its summit no longer the place of triumph, but something far darker. The wind howled again, but this time it wasn't a warning. It was a command. Join them, the voice inside their heads urged, and that was when they realized those who dared to summit Everest never truly left. They became part of the mountain, trapped in its eternal grip, their souls bound to the cold, silent peak. Leah and Alex were never seen again. Their bodies, like those before them, simply disappeared into the endless, crushing snow, becoming whispers in the wind. And so, the summit of Mount Everest remains silent, its secrets buried deep in the frozen heart of the world. For those who dared climb its heights, the mountain always demands a price.